All right, so I think everybody can see this. All right. Well, we're going to get going because it's now 7:30, right on time. So I think I know a lot of you here anyway, but I'm Sharon Body. I'm with Friends of Hampton Park and Friends of Carlington Woods. And we are going to be coming up on our 7th of our 8-part webinar series, Growing Native Wildflowers from Seed. So there's just a couple of housekeeping notes right there on the front. So we are recording and it will be up on our YouTube channel probably by this weekend, maybe even by Thursday or Friday. So once the demo's done, we'll open it up to questions, so you can feel free to post your questions at any time in the chat. I've already put some resources in there, so those are some really good ones that we've used before for, a lot of germination. Different seeds have different requirements. So, and we also want you to stick around for the end because we're going to have a giveaway. So this lovely book, which is called How to Save Seed, is from a Canadian charity, but it's mainly for vegetables, but a lot of the same sort of philosophies and processes to save vegetable seeds you can apply as well to others. So this is a lovely book, and we're going to have it based on a skill testing question. So you'll want to stick around for the end. And the runners up are going to get some native wildflower seeds, a little gift package of those. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I'm going to introduce Nora. And then we can all see Nora's screen a lot bigger. So Nora Lee, who is waving from behind her little counter there, she's a volunteer with us at Friends of Carlington Woods, and she's also with the Wild Pollinators Partnership, and she's also the lead gardener at the Clyde Bee and Butterfly Patch. So she's going to start us off with about 15-20 minutes of some of the different techniques that we can use. And then, as I said, we can get to questions. If you want to follow along, we had sent some of you a list of some of the supplies. Feel free to grab those if you want. And we also, like I said, encourage you to share whatever lessons or lessons learned that you have, best practices, or other resources in the chat as we go along. So I'm going to shut up now and hand it over to Nora.
Okay, thanks very much, Sharon. And yeah, you won't be able to see much of me except maybe this pollinator shirt I got on. But so what I wanted to tell you about today was basically, well, actually about 3 different methods. I'll do the second 2 fairly quickly. And the idea for they're mainly about cold conditioning, like for seeds that require cold conditioning, which is also called stratification. Not all native seeds need that. In fact, a lot of them don't, but it can also be handy to use these methods if you want to get your seed planting done early and you're not sure. It sort of saves you figuring out when to plant things. And also, yeah, there's some things that really do benefit from the cold period, or they need that to initiate germination. So the first method I'm going to talk about is called winter sowing. And you basically actually put your seed in soil and put it in a pot and put it outside. And what I do is make these little mini greenhouses. So I'll show you a few different containers. So this is one that I've used before, and so you can see it's made from a 2-liter pop bottle, and you just cut it in more or less in half, and you have to put holes in the bottom. And we'll do one of those if you're lined up to actually work along with me. I'll make one of these. And one of the things to note is how high up you should cut the thing apart. You do need it reasonably deep because you do want to have an adequate amount of soil. Some plants put down quite a deep root, and so it's important to make sure you're covered for that. Now, you also don't want to waste soil, so you might want to check for your particular plant whether that's necessary. So there's also things like these, you know, these peach or peach containers that you get that they already have holes in them, and they have a little lid, so it's like a mini greenhouse already. You can even use something like this, which it's not clear, but there's enough light that gets in these that it works just fine. In every case, you not only have to have holes, but you have to have an opening at the top to let any precipitation get in as well. I mean, it was occurred to me that you could also use, you know, something like that. Again, it's just a matter of making the holes in the top and the bottom. So I think that's my selection of containers. So here's I'm planning to use this large 4-liter distilled water container. And by the way, any of these things, if you don't happen to have kept any yourself, you can always go out on Blue Bin night and pick them up. Or there are sometimes people giving them away, you know, on free cycle type sites, and they just don't want to throw them out or even just recycle them if they don't have to. So the way you would prepare this is probably pretty obvious, but just take a sharp X-Acto knife, and remembering it's sharp, you're just going to decide on how far to. In fact, I'm going to take off this label. Yeah, decide again. You want to have enough depth, but if it's too deep, like don't do it way up at the top, because and then it's harder to handle the seedlings. Like you're not going to fill that up this high with soil. Maybe just a couple to 2 or 4 inches. And if you've made it too deep, it'll be hard to get your seedlings out of the container. So I would do it maybe around about here. And pretty straightforward. Put around like this. And then for the bottom, I just take the same X-Acto knife and put little triangles, hook it in, make little triangles to, and really you don't need to cut the whole triangle out, just a V. You're already, you know, that's enough to let the water drain. Of these, so, you know, will allow you to keep the soil inside the pot. Herbie has joined me, but hopefully he'll be quiet while we're doing this. So the next step is to have your soil. Now this, I'm just using a standard, well, ProMix potting soil. It's sometimes recommended to add some more perlite or something like that to lighten it up a bit. I haven't bothered myself with that recently, but it should be moistened without being really wet. Like, so it'll clump like that, you know, but it won't have water pouring out of it if you squeeze it. So I'm just going to pour this in here. I hope I've made myself enough. Now I'm thinking I might not. I might have to borrow some back for my later steps. So this is, yeah, that's a little shallow. I didn't think ahead about this. I would say I would make that a little bit deeper, ideally, and then you just tamp it down gently with your fingers, or if you feel you don't want to handle it, then you can use a piece of wood or something, just to, you want to get rid of any air pockets and make sure that the top of the soil is flat and relatively even. So once you've gotten your soil in place, I've got a couple of seeds here. to plant. And you can actually, if you make a container, you know, like this, and you think, well, I don't want to fill the whole thing with one seed, you can actually use a piece of plastic from one of your surplus containers and make a divider. I've done that myself. I'm going to do the lance leaf coreopsis, or tick seed. It's actually not one that requires the cold conditioning, but it doesn't matter. It's a native from this area, and so it can, you know, manage in a cold situation, like, you know, going through winter is part of its normal process. So I'm just putting the seeds on top. You don't want it to make it too dense, because you're going to have too many seedlings then, and they'll be too close together, and they'll be harder to transplant. You're going to, of course, have to transplant these eventually. So maybe allow them to be about an inch apart from the others. I've been even less careful about that before, which is why I'm saying try to be a little careful and put the seeds that you have left over back into the container. I've got this white sheet. I don't know if anybody could see that, but I put that there because sometimes you want to dump your seeds out onto like a sheet of paper or something first, and just see what you've got. Which makes me also want to mention that you might want to make sure you do have seed, because sometimes through, you know, individual like collections by average gardeners like ourselves, they may not have actually collected real seed. So that's something we could talk about during the discussion afterwards, if anybody has questions about how to decide. In this case, the lance leaf coreopsis seed was quite easy to tell. So I lay them on the surface and press them a little bit into the soil, but these need to be covered. So what I suggest is you use some drier soil.
Nora,
yeah.
Can you just tip that towards the camera, just so that people can see if they could see like what you put into there?
Into the seeds, or
yeah, into there, like just tip it, yeah, towards the camera a little bit, so yeah, so that people can see some of the seed that's in there. Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah,
is it visible? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I can certainly see bits and pieces.
You can see the rounder, lighter material.
Yeah.
Yeah, in this case you can still see them because of the size and the color, but sometimes, yeah, it can be pretty hard to see because they're very dark or something. So I'm suggesting that to cover, you can take your drier soil, same type of soil, that just helps you to cover what's in your container, what you've just planted. It just spreads more easily, and you're going to make sure this gets good and wet anyways afterwards. So it's about, normally the depth is about the same diameter, like the same depth as the diameter of the seed, is sort of a rule of thumb. And then just also tamp. I'm forgetting that you need to see this. Just tamping that down a little bit. And then now I've read recently that what is recommended is to actually soak your pots with your seed in it over like a 24-hour period. It's not something I've done, but the point is that these are dry seed, and you need them to imbibe water to initiate the germination. So it's definitely important to make sure you've watered it enough. And I've done it just this way before, but I take good advice, and so soaking it for 24 hours. Now, the way you do that is have a pan that's just deep enough so you can set your pot in it, or pots, and just add water up to where they can they'll be absorbing a fair bit of water from the pan that you put it in. And then make sure you drain it properly after that process before you put it outside. So having put the seed in here, and I will be, the next thing is to make sure you label it, okay? And for these type of containers, I've actually used my label maker to good effect. It makes a fairly durable label. That was the case with this one here. So it's got, can you see the label? Yeah, that's gone through, a whole winter or more than a winter outside, and it's quite good. Another way to label it is to just write on the outside of the container. It's a little bit harder to see with a black magic marker, but you can do that. Another alternative is to label, like put the name on a stick or a label, like a label type thing, and put that inside.
Why is it so loose?
Nora, sorry, I muted you by accident. Nora, I muted you by accident. You're gonna have to unmute.
To get that whole butt, you're screwed.
Sorry about that. One second. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. There was, I didn't notice there was a little white box saying stay muted or unmute. Okay. Anyways, I was just saying that the last alternative I mentioned, I don't know how far back I should go, is to put a label inside. And one of the points to remember is if you're going to label the container, make sure you put your label on the bottom half, okay? Because you can, if you've made a few of these with the same kind of container and at some point you take them apart for whatever reason, maybe to water them in the spring or something, then you might mix up the tops and then you don't remember what you've got. This has happened to people, so make sure it's on the bottom half. So I'm not going to do my labeling right now myself because I wanted to make a label with the label maker and that's going to take too much time. But I'll show you how you put this on. So it's a question of I might not finish doing this, but you kind of have to make a little divot in the side of the bottom. Because after all, yeah, it doesn't matter if it's not perfectly, evenly planted on top of the bottom, because a little bit of moisture getting in from the side is perfectly fine. And also you're going to leave the top off to let any precipitation come in as it will. So the next thing I want to show you, and I feel like I'm rushing along through here, but you can always ask me questions afterwards. So the next type of approach, now I'm going to tell you the two that are next. One is just a plastic bag that you're going to put soil in and then your seed. And the other is using a small pot like that, like a 2.5 inch or 3 inch pot, and putting soil in that, planting that, and then putting it inside a plastic bag. Something a little bit larger, so that you can make sure you have a high enough top. Now, both of these are to go in the fridge. So I'll use my little pot of dry soil here and moisten that. Another tip actually about getting your soil ready for planting seeds is to moisten it the day before. Which I'm not doing right now. I'm doing it right now, but just for demonstration, I'm doing it right now. But if you add the water about 12 or 24 hours earlier, it will be more well absorbed by the soil, and that's just better overall. So I've added quite a bit of moisture. So it's just pretty simple. I'm just adding it to the bag. And again, it doesn't, you don't fill it up, you're just adding enough to, because you're not going to have the plant actually start growing in the bag. Most plants will, or seeds will get their germination initiated in here, but they don't necessarily start putting out roots and leaves. That comes after you've removed it from the fridge and put it into put it into a pot. So again, I'm going to use the lance leaf coreopsis. You can all find out in a few weeks how this all went. But this case, of course, you're not carefully distributing it, other than making sure it gets mixed in with the soil, because it's not a pot. And you're going to have it like that, close it up, write again a label with the name of the plant and ideally the date. And if you're putting it in the fridge, you should put the date that you're going to take it out of the fridge, because the point of using the fridge is for something, not so much for things that, it really is for things that need the cold stratification. All right, so there's a distinction between the winter sowing, where I said, anything native, you could just do it that way and all at once, and in the middle of winter or in the fall even. But if you're going to use the fridge, it's really you only do that for seeds that need the period of cold, and different seeds need different periods of cold, and that's something you have to check on with your individual species through one of the websites that I think we either mentioned or we will mention, where you can look that kind of information up. So it's just because you don't want to use up your fridge space with all your seeds if they don't need to be there, okay? And again, the advantage of using the pot is that you don't have to transplant it once, you don't have to sort of take your mix of seeds and soil and then spread that on a pot or in the garden. If you could put it straight out in the garden. You can keep it in the pot, bring it outside once out of the fridge once the time it's needed to be in there is finished, and then grow it on, like it can sprout and grow on for a while in the pot. And if you do it this way, you should allow yourself a bit of room. That's why I'm using this rather large bag rather than a baggie, and have room for it to grow a bit, still acting as a bit of a greenhouse. Okay, so the last thing I guess to mention is I like to suggest or recommend that people record, not just on the label, but in a little booklet. Maybe you'll put it on on a spreadsheet and put the name of the plant, maybe where you got it from, like the Ottawa Wildflower Seed Library, the date you're putting it. I'm not sure what I've got here. Well, year of this, you could even include like what year it was collected, when you planted it, where you put it. So if you put it in the fridge or outside, you can forget these things. So it's good to, have that kind of record, and allows you to sort of watch the development and, have a sense of how things went. Like also, actually, the day it sprouts is a good thing to add in that spreadsheet or table. All right. Anybody think of anything else I should have said? I think I'm done for now, so we can go to questions.
Oh, that's great. I've already got a couple of questions myself.
Okay, super.
But I think there's been some chat going on, and I think Melanie did answer. Somebody had asked about how many inches of soil was in that first container. Looked to be about 3 inches. And again, I think Melanie had mentioned in the chat that the milkweed, certain plants like milkweed, they have pretty deep roots. So
Yeah.
Yeah, you may need a certain minimum amount of soil, I guess.
Yeah, I think with the milkweed, it's good to have about 4 inches of soil. That's what I've encountered, but probably 2-3 inches. 3 inches is probably a good average.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, it can end up being a fair bit of soil you're needing, depending on how many seeds you're going to plant.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about that in relation to the size of your containers and whether you need to divide them or not is all part of your calculation.
Okay. Somebody had also mentioned the first container you used. Sometimes the plastics can be pretty flimsy when they're, and for outdoor use, but I think that one's relatively robust, I think.
Yeah.
So if that one were to go outside, that will handle the element, right?
Oh yeah. No, these are strong enough.
Yeah. I think it was more those like the clamshell ones. Some of the really flimsy ones might not.
Well, I've used those outside. Yeah, you want to think about that a little bit. They're not really, I guess the cold can make them crack. That's if they're really flimsy, but mostly I've not had that problem.
Okay. All right. And just, like Nora, I mentioned this to Nora, but I had given some native seeds and was doing that with some 4-year-olds on Friday. Today is Wednesday, and the anise hyssop is already sprouting.
Yeah.
5 days. Like it's 5 days and it's already sprouting. And that was a 4-year-old who did that. So
yeah, and that's planting in at room temperature, right?
At room temperature. So those are seeds that you could just grow inside your house as long as it's around 18-20 degrees Celsius inside. They'll be okay. And there's several species like that.
Yeah, and just to say too, sorry to interrupt you again, but if that kind of seed you could still put outside, like I'm showing you. It won't sprout until the conditions are right for it.
Yeah.
So
it's just more fun to have something growing this time.
Yeah. It's whatever you want to do. Yeah.
I remember seeing one a demonstration on the bag method where somebody took they just blew a little bit of air into it, saying that a little bit of carbon dioxide helps get the seed growing. Is that something that you would even recommend or not bother with?
Well, I hadn't thought of that or heard of it, but I don't think it would hurt. I don't know what whether it has a positive effect or not. So
okay.
Has anybody else on the webinar aware?
Yeah, feel free to unmute. I'm going to ask everybody to unmute so we can all chit chat. Yeah, so if you've got a question, raise your hand or anything like that.
Or an idea, something you can share with us is also welcome.
Yeah. On the recording, what I did this year was I actually just numbered the pots, and then I made a list of, number 1 is this, number 2 is this.
Yeah,
so instead of actually having to remember I just put a number on them.
Yeah, that's okay as long as you I don't know, you don't lose your list or
yeah, that's true. Okay,
yeah.
we've got a hand up from Diane. Diane, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Thanks so much for doing this. So I've never done this stratification before. So let's say you have your little pot inside the bag in the fridge and it says 6 weeks. So I do that tomorrow. And then at the end of March, I take them out of the freezer or out of the fridge. They won't be sprouted yet though, right?
No.
No. So at that point, can I, because we're only at the end of March, right? And I still have snow in my backyard. So can I just grow them in the house under a lamp like I would any other flower, that I grow in the house? The seedlings, like I do all my marigolds or the easy ones indoors, and then I plant them out in the garden. So can you do the same with the natives?
Yeah, that's usually what's it's said. If you look at the germination requirements, it's often like 4 degrees for X number of weeks or whatever, and then move to 20 degrees. So
Okay,
yeah. So that's
excellent.
yeah.
Yeah, you'll find, I mean, there's species that, like there's a lot of them that have all the same, this is the same requirement, but then there's a whole other, series of them that need something else. So yeah, it's like anything else, you get to know them, and you start small with a couple of them that you get to know really well, and then yeah, you can go from there.
Can I just add also that like before you take them out, you will need to harden them just like you would for any regular vegetable or traditional flowers.
That's a great comment. Now, I mean, for those of you who don't know about hardening off, Melanie, why don't you take us through, like, what's that sort of process?
So it's the process of like making sure that you customize your seeds to outdoors. And you're supposed to do it a little bit at a time, like gradually, before transplanting them outside. So they're not going to be ready, even if they sprout in the fridge, they're not going to be ready to be taken outside, because if you winter sowed them not a long time ago, if they're 30 days, they might sprout like soon. So you have to really grow them inside and then get them accustomed to outside. Yeah.
But can you take them out, bring them back in the evening, sort of
Yeah,
thing?
yeah, that's kind of
That's
what
what
you
I've
have to
done
do,
with
like a
some
little
of
bit at a
mine.
time, maybe like, I don't know, like an hour, and then you bring them in, and
Yeah, when you get those 30-degree days in the middle of April.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You need
But
to.
if they haven't sprouted, and then instead of starting them inside, you start them outside, then you don't have to harden them.
That's right.
As long as they haven't sprouted.
That's the one thing. Another nice thing about winter sowing is that they're already outside now. They're protected a bit because they're in the container with the lid on. Actually, I forgot to mention that. Where do you put it when you go outside? I guess I tend to think it's not a bad idea to put them where they can be covered with snow and not in a sunny spot, because that way you're sort of, I mean, they're going to go through their cold and warming process no matter what you do, but this might help to limit the extremes of that.
Yeah. So
So my advice is to like put them like either on the north or east facing spot. And the reason why I know that, so for the people that don't know me, I'm Melanie Willett. I'm the founder of the Ottawa Wildflowers Seed Library. And like 100% of the time when people come and tell me I have not had any luck winter sowing, that's because they put their seedlings in the south facing spot. And the seedlings just bake. Because if you think about it, like, when the flowers bloom, then it goes to seed, then it falls on the ground, then leaves fall on top of it, twigs fall on top of it, snow falls on top of it. So it's not like a nature, that the seed is not like on bare soil, like in full sun. Like that's not really how it works. So, and I tell you, it's to a point where I know when they say, the winter sowing did not go well, I tell them, did you plant them like in a south facing spot, or put them in a south facing spot? And they always tell me yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's based on experience. I'm telling you about those poor people that didn't work out for them. So north or east facing is the way to go.
Is there anything that they can do to shade them or shield them if all they've got is south or west facing?
I've never tried it. So
Okay.
like if you do, like report back, please, because I would like to know. I'm lucky that I don't have to do that. So yeah. But even if you water them, it's just too much sun. I tried it my own self. Like the only seeds that really tolerated it was milkweed. But everything else, like asters, liatris, like you name it, zopai weed, like it all died. They all died because it was too hot.
It's too hot.
Yeah.
Well, that brings up another question too, because I mean, you know, yes, these are native wildflowers, but as our climates are changing and they're getting warmer, have you been noticing any changes within some of the native species? Anybody who is, you know, like who works with these, you know, if they're coming, you know, earlier in the season, possibly, if they're blooming earlier or for longer? I don't know.
Oh, no, I don't have it.
I can answer if that's useful. Like, so I've just been monitoring that for the last few years. I saw like some data a few days ago that said that plants are expected to start blooming trees are starting to sprout 3 weeks in advance this year. And I think last year was 2 weeks in advance than what it used to be by people that, you know, are used to tracking that. So
Yeah.
we're definitely seeing that that trend. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
That's a lot, eh?
The May 24 planting rule is fast going the way of the dodo bird, I think.
Yeah, and so goes also for winter sowing, because we used to advise people like, oh, if you wait to winter sow, like, you know, end of November, beginning of December, you're sure that you're not like, because what can happen if you winter sow too early, is that your seeds think it's springtime, they sprout, and then like frost comes and then they're killed.
Yeah.
And so we used to advise people to winter sow like after like November, beginning of December, because that's when you would like expect that, you know, we would be past like some sort of springtime-ish temperature.
Yeah.
But now it's a lot more tricky. Yeah.
Can't count on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we've got another question here from Bonnie. What happens if all goes well to the winter sown pots full of seeds? Do the seedlings go straight into the garden then? I think she's talking about the one in the pot and then the bag. Is that right, Bonnie?
No, this is the winter sown pots outside.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
so you can definitely transplant those into the garden once they're, you know, a robust size. In fact, you can wait quite a while, because I've done it where I've had so many of these pots, and some have had been there quite a while, and there's a lot of growth on top, and you know, it's been sort of into June or something before I've gotten around to planting them. But yeah, you can plant them.
Is there a sort of a follow-up question to that? Is there any use to aligning the pots so then you can sort of lift them a little bit easier out, like some of those containers? I've seen people who maybe lined it with a paper towel or something, and you can sort of lift the whole thing out. I don't know.
Oh.
You've done that? Or anyone else?
No, I have not.
Okay.
I don't know if the paper towel would it survive that, because it's
or like a piece of
Nice.
newsprint.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think for the answer also, like to the question, it depends how densely you've sown your seeds.
Yeah.
Like if you have a tiny pot and you've put like 30 seeds in, they're gonna be like super close. And so you might need to transplant them in bigger pots before they're decent size to be put in the garden.
That's a good
So
point.
it depends how, like, you know, if you do what you've just learned tonight and space them about an inch, like one from another, you should be fine. But, you know, some people just go and like sprinkle them and they're all lumped together. And so you might need to transplant them to another pot and space them out before they're big enough to be transplanted into the garden. So I would say it depends, like.
Okay, yeah, that's really what I'm looking for. They were definitely not spaced out an inch between.
Yeah, exactly. So you might expect to have to move them a little bit to bigger pots. That's the advantage of using like bigger pots, like when you're winter sowing, because you can space them out a little bit. And if you're like me, you kind of want to skip the transplant the second time phase and waste a little bit more soil. And so that's that's what I do.
Sorry.
Go
Did
ahead.
I see a trick one time of like taking a lot of seedlings all tangled in together and just sort of setting them in water to get their roots apart?
Yes.
Transplant from there. That's the trick.
Yes, you can do that. It helps you to tease the roots apart. Like, you know, I guess with the water, you can kind of swish it around gently, and you'll be able to remove the one plant from another. I learned another thing I learned recently was because I've done some bare root planting where you take your pot plant and you rinse the soil off actually before you plant the plant. And that's done in, like, if you've got crevice gardens and you need, you're trying to insert a plant into a narrow space, that's where that started. But I actually did it in the Clyde bee and butterfly patch and had very good results with the plants that we put there under those conditions. Then one thing I learned recently was, well, if you've let's say used potting soil with a mycorrhiza fungi in it, then you're rinsing that off.
Yeah, that's a good
I
point.
didn't think of that, So if it's not going to kill the plant, it just might not, provide as much benefit as if you left some of the soil on. I think that this person was saying that they try to separate it and keep some of the soil with the plant.
That makes sense. Thanks a lot.
Could you do something similar? Like, I know that when you grow, say, tomatoes, it's completely different, but they advise you, pick off the weaker one, right? So maybe if you seeded by accident, you just sort of pick off maybe the weaker ones instead of going through all the finicky business of trying to separate them. I don't know.
Yeah,
I suppose it depends on the seed that you've got and how valuable it might be.
Exactly. Well, yeah, I've seen that for sure. If you put like 3 tomato seeds in a pot and you're gonna sacrifice 2 of them, like by cutting them off at the soil level. Whereas if again, I agree not to plant too densely in these winter sowing pots so that you can, hopefully separate them more easily than if tangled weeds. Because I mean, you may have to sacrifice. You could still pick out the strongest ones that you find in your bundle of seeds or tangle of seedlings.
But we're gonna have like a plant exchange event. Like the seed library is gonna have plant exchange event, like toward the spring and summer once they're big enough. So any extra seedlings you have, you can donate, and that's how I've been donating most of my seedlings and extra plants. Like, cause like I don't want to repot everything. So if I take them out of my garden, I just put them in water and then I bring the water container to the event and then people can just pick it. So then, it's a lot less costly for me. But I think one of the benefits also sharing like bare root plants is that we really reduce the risk of contamination and moving around of invasive species and things like that, especially when we get like plants from southern Ontario. We hear about the jumping worms and stuff, and so I think there's a lot of benefit to using less soil in what we do and how we exchange plants and stuff. Yeah.
Certainly whenever we've taken donations of plants from other people's yards, we put them in water. We clean them off before they go in because we can't take that chance. The National Capital Commission would have our heads.
And also it's better because it reduces the transplantation shock too. So if you're giving a plant to somebody who's never gardened before and that might not know that you're supposed to let them soak in the water before transplanting them, that's gonna increase their success rate too. So like it's like a win-win-win-win.
But it's a good thing to note because I mean you guys do your due diligence and a lot of places do on their plant sales, but some communities don't. So sometimes they'll have a community fundraiser and they'll have a community plant sale. So if you're ever going to buy a plant from them, just just be warned, you might be bringing something home with you. So be careful. Because but we can trust the Ottawa Wildflower Seed Library. We can trust the Fletcher Wildlife Garden because I know that they've done seed exchanges and plant sales as well. And you can trust us because we've had a plant sale before too.
Good.
You mentioning about the about bringing the seedling in water. I don't remember the name of the organization, but there's a woman who does she sells seedlings. I think she lives in the east end of the city, and
Oh, yes, Honduras.
say the name again.
Cultivate, a
A
cultivated
cultivated
art.
art? Yeah.
And I think she just wraps them in
Yeah.
paper. Or something. Yeah.
Yeah, she uses as little soil as possible. Yeah,
Wow.
It's also just to reduce plastic as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, why not? I mean, you don't have to buy anything fancy, right? I mean,
No.
everything you need is in your house, or
Yeah.
it's in your neighbor's blue box.
Yeah. And
So-
the soil that we buy comes from elsewhere, just like some of the plants we find it comes from as well. So it's all about local,
yeah.
using local products, reducing our environmental impact,
Right.
cost less money, less, chances of getting some diseases. Like it's all good. Yeah.
Does anybody have recommendations on soil types? Because I know certainly peat moss, we may want to be, rethinking that because it's quite damaging when it's mined. But I mean, any recommendations on, good soil that, we can sort of trust? Always.
Just on the peat moss thing,
Yeah.
I think it's good to do a little more research. I started looking into that in Canada, and the situation in Canada is quite different from Europe, where we're hearing about banning mining of peat moss, or if you want to call it mining, harvesting, because in Canada there's a large amount of completely untouched peat bog, and I think they say that 81% of the peat bogs in Canada are not being harvested, and of the rest, most of the rest is farming, like it's agricultural use, and I'm not sure if that meant that they actually grow in it, like farm in it, or if they are taking it out to use. But there's only about 1% is horticulturally used for potting mixes, and there's quite a strict rules about doing it.
Good. So
I mean, I've only read a couple of articles, and they're mostly from the sort of the side of the suppliers. So I'd like to read a little more from more critical side, but it did sound quite like it didn't sound like a whitewash, to me, the way I was reading.
okay.
So and they have to restore. They have requirements to restore the bogs that they do harvest from, and then they don't touch it again. Like the idea is that once they've harvested what they're going to, like there's a limit on that, then they seed it. Like seeding isn't the right word, but they
Rebog it.
they replant sphagnum in it, and that grows back in about 14 years or something. It takes a little while, but anyway, just to say that there seems to be more to the story than if you hear it casually mentioned.
Yeah. No, I just remember reading, it was about a year or two ago, it was a Quebec company that got an enormous contract, and I think it was somewhere in Saskatchewan. And there was quite a number of people up in arms about what they were going to be allowed to do.
Yeah, I know.
So provincially, there may be different rules. And the other thing is, I mean, wetlands are our most important ecosystems, and bogs are part of wetlands. So as far as I'm concerned, to be harvesting anything just to be growing, some flowers where we have other, we have alternatives. I don't know, like, so, yes, it's certainly an issue that deserves more attention and some more research. Yeah, for sure. All right.
So just for the peat moss comment, like I would not recommend using like 100% peat moss for the seedlings, but like just the regular potting mix will do. A regular potting mix usually have a little bit of peat moss. I try to sow seeds in native soil that we have here, but you don't get the same amount of results. Yeah, it's a lot harder to get seedlings from that. So but peat moss is not it doesn't sustain moisture enough. So, and it's acidic soil, I think. So irregular potting mix is the way to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
I just put sorry, I'm just going to add something. It's Christine.
Yeah.
I just put an article in the chat because my daughter goes to Queen's and she was offered a position, she's in 3rd year, to do research this summer with a Queen's professor who is paid for by the peat industry in Quebec to research actually to improve the damage caused
Good.
by peat bog extraction. So I was sort of concerned about her taking on this research project that is industry funded. So I was just curious, and I found one article, and I haven't gone through it carefully, but I put it in the chat because it is an article about, can peat land be restored, and is it restored to, obviously not to the same level, but what is expected in Canada, and it talks a little bit about the Canadian context and Europe, I think. But as I said, I haven't gone through it too carefully, and it's the first article that I looked at.
I know Diane's dying to ask a question, but I just have to add one more resource to that.
Oh, no, it's
question. It's the I read a wonderful book called Swamplands, and it's written by a man works at University of Waterloo. Super comprehensive, all over the world, stories of Canadian, the Quebec industry, all through, and historic. And it does such a great job of telling like a pretty horrendous history of like 150 years of trying really hard to dig all the ditches and drain every wetland you could possibly find. And like what is left is just such a fraction of what
Well, it's something like
1700, let alone
70 to 80% of their wetlands are gone.
Oh,
in the
horrendous,
last 70,
right?
80 years.
So
Yeah,
in that
makes sense.
context, I don't know, gives me a little pause, but I take the point that there is more sustainable harvesting possibilities. Yeah, highly recommend Swamp.
Yeah.
Really, really interesting. And
Yeah.
very sorry, Diane.
Oh, no, and simply because it can be restored doesn't mean it will be restored, right? I mean, look at the
Yeah.
lots
Good
of
point.
examples in industry. But I guess I'm back onto this whole thing I have in my head because I've never grown natives from seed.
Yeah, okay,
I've
good.
had seedlings, and I've planted them in and they've grown. But
Good.
so are they more hardy than like a non-native flower? And what I'm thinking of is, can I put them in the ground? Do I have to wait till the May 30th after the long weekend, or can they go in sooner? Or, I have in my mind that they're tougher.
Are they outside?
Yeah, I mean to plant them. Like I've got my
No,
little.
but are they like winter sowed outside?
No, I mean I'm going to throw them in the fridge, like what you just
Yeah.
showed us. And then I'm
And
going to grow
then-
them under. I've got grow lights that I use for my other flowers, but I want
Okay.
it to go native this year. And so when the little seedlings are ready, like at what point do they go outside, in our climate? Do you have to wait till after frost like any other plant?
Any
or-
other plant, you should probably.
Yeah, you
They're the
should
same?
and take
Okay,
it.
yeah,
take it
because I
easy,
have in
yeah.
my mind, that I can put them out earlier or something.
No.
Okay.
I mean-
Well, if you want to put them earlier, once you're done with the fridge, you can put them outside before they sprout.
Like put the whole pod and with
Winter sow
and
it.
Yeah.
right outside. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, and let them sprout outside then inside.
Yeah,
with
and
the
then you don't
plastic.
have to do the hardening part.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's the
okay.
same
Oh,
as winter
see,
sowing.
okay,
So.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'm just trying to get my head around this. All
Yeah,
right,
yes.
so yeah, just take the little pot in the bag, put, out of the fridge,
Yeah.
put it on the patio, out of the sun.
Exactly.
let
Yeah.
it go. Okay. Oh,
'Cause you
that's,
can
That's the easiest thing we tell people to do when you're starting.
Yeah.
You can't, it's hard to mess up that method.
it is, because I do like to put them under lights and watch them, grow in the house.
Oh, yes.
It's just as exciting to go
Yeah.
out and see them coming up in the pots. I mean, that's just as exciting.
Okay, well, I might
I think-
just experiment and do some in and some out and just see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, why not? I mean, why not experiment, right? So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I was just going to put I've got all these packages of seeds that I ordered last year, and I was just going to put the whole pack in the fridge, just
Yeah, that's a good idea.
No, but I had no idea about this method, so
You have to
Ah,
moist-
Oh, okay. You mean, yeah. Okay,
yeah, I
yeah.
was just going to put the seed, the whole
Oh,
pack.
just in the
Okay,
package like
here's
that.
the ones
Oh,
I have to
yeah.
go in the
No.
fridge, and I'll just put them in the fridge and then take them out and plant them after. Okay, good.
No, you have to get them, the moisture is the key thing.
Yeah. Okay, I've got it now. This is good.
Okay.
But I think one of the things also that is unforeseen when you start gardening with native plants is how much it changes you as a person and how you learn to garden more slowly. It kind of works on you in mysterious ways. You'll see. In 2 years from now, you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember what you said. Yeah. Because I was like extremely impatient. Like if I wanted to plant, I had to get into a nursery and go get it right away. Like I couldn't even wait today, you know? And now I'm like, oh, it's gonna be ready in 3 years. Nice. Like, you know, it's kind of like it kind of changes you too and your whole approach to gardening. You learn to enjoy like the full life cycle and not just like I don't know. It's a different attachment, I guess. Yeah.
But it's true because I mean, through plants, you end up learning about other things that are just in the environment. So automatically you're going to start noticing what insects are coming to your yard.
Yeah.
Right.
You're gonna start reading about swamps.
Exactly. You're going to go down little rabbit holes, and that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a little concerned because I've got a whole pile of these things. And I mean, I have a few in my garden already, but not very many. But I'm just concerned because some of them, like they all seem to grow like a meter or more tall. And I'm thinking, they're all so big. A lot of them seem so big. And I'm thinking, well, I don't have a huge garden. I wonder what this is going to look like. So that's the next challenge, right? Is where to plant them.
Well, and you can also, I mean, if you look at each of the species online, like with some of the resources that we've already given, like some of those germination, they'll tell you how high they grow. So you can plan your garden, right? So if you want something that's 6 feet tall and then you only want something that's 2 feet, and you can sort of, you can plan it out that way. Or by
I mean, on the packages, they have all of that, right?
Yes.
Even like it's,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's just,
Usually,
Yeah,
but
like
the packages can be a little light on information. I would definitely recommend going to one of those websites and sort of seeing the more detailed.
There's definitely a whole variety because when we were preparing or planning the Clyde bee and butterfly patch, that was something we thought about. What colors they were, when they were going to bloom, and how big they were going to be. So there's a lot of parameters to keep in your head, but
there is. I mean, it's quite complex, and I'm not very mathematical, so
I'm mostly surprised most of the time and sort of love it.
And
Thank you a lot. I'm gonna have to call it. Have a wonderful evening.
And it depends also because sometimes you can play around with that. Like, we will see like the plant like can be 5 to 7 feet tall, for example. And like 7 feet tall might be if you give it like full sun and lots of water because it's a wet plant.
Yeah.
But if you put it in part shade and you let it dry a little bit, maybe it's going to be shorter. So, so it depends also of the conditions you give them.
Yeah. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to, from the ones that we've been growing, and a lot of them, they tend to bloom later in the season, the majority of them. And I don't know if that's sort of because they're Canadian species, because they're hardier, maybe they do have, they're used to blooming in like sort of late July, August, September, because we have shorter seasons. So I've been looking more at the ones that bloom a little earlier this year because I have a lot of the late bloomers already, and I want those insects in my yard, earlier. So, but
but the earlier blooming ones tend to be the woodland species that, are getting the sun because there's no leaves on the trees.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And a lot of the trees too. Like, so if you want to attract insects and support them in the springtime, it's mostly like trees that are in bloom.
Yeah.
And so it's like plants are kind of like a later kind of bloomers. Yeah. So if you want to do the full cycle, sometimes it's good to look into trees also.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Is anybody growing trees at all in this group?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which ones?
I have a red maple, and I also have like a downy serviceberry.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And so, so those ones are filled with bees, like, and also like, like plants, when we say native plants have evolved with like species and insects and like, like hummingbirds, migrate here. And so like it's not worth it for a plant if you're going to be pollinated if you've evolved to be pollinated by hummingbirds to bloom early because your peeps have not shown up yet.
Yeah, exactly. But I see so many bees coming out so early. It's just like, I want to give you something to eat.
Yes, well, plant trees, because that's kind of the way to go. There's only a few that are, And
Yeah, or
even the
shrubs.
woodland species are, are pollinated by like ants and like, so it's and spread by ants. So,
Yeah,
so
really
trees is probably their way to go for springtime.
All
Yeah,
right.
what about dandelions? Because I know the no mow May thing that's so big in the UK, and
Yeah.
and people say that our bees, it's a different species, and that they don't go for dandelions. Is that true? Like
Well,
our dandelions?
Our dandelions are European dandelions.
Yeah, so
so
our bees
they're-
are not using the.
No, exactly. Yeah. Well, they
So
will go. It's like McDonald's. It's
Yeah,
not as
they'll
nutritious.
still use them for sure.
If
And-
there's nothing else, they will go on it.
Yeah.
But if there's something else, they will go to the native
The
species.
McDonald's, that's good.
They're not
Yeah,
as
because it's not as nutritious too.
yeah.
And so, like, would you like to eat McDonald's all day, like for a full season? No. So, like, that's kind of why we have to give them more nutritious food.
Well, Diane, were you on our Pollinator Pals webinar?
You know, no, I wasn't able to come, but I'm
Okay.
gonna watch it. Yeah,
That's
I mean,
that's on our YouTube station, and Lydia Wong gives a list of the plants and how much protein and fat each one gives to
Oh.
bees. So you can get a lot of them, some of them are vegetables. Like I never knew jalapeno peppers are very, very good for bees. Very high in protein, very high in the good fat.
Okay.
they need. So it's just like, great, I grow those things every year. So,
Well, I was seeing on Twitter somebody who's gardening, but it's south of here. We're saying oregano is a really
yeah.
big one for pollinators, which I didn't know. So,
I
That's for
didn't even, like, I've never had my oregano flower, but then again, I'm constantly
oh,
eating
I often
Mm.
not on purpose.
And
Well-
also, like, I think it's important to keep in mind there's different types of bees that come out at different times of the year.
Yeah.
And each bee, bee species have evolved to come out, like, a lot of them will come out during like the trees that are in bloom. But there's like other types of bees that are I'm thinking of leaf cutter bees, for example. They come out later in the year. And so it's important to have always something at hand for them.
Mhm.
So not just the springtime, but and that's why we recommend never to clean your garden if you can, because
Mhm.
like they need habitat, and it takes them a year to, because you're gonna start seeing like signs like that, like, oh, don't clean your garden until it's 10 degrees Celsius or 15. Like that's not how it works. They come out at different times, and if you disturb the soil or the leaves and so forth, like you kind of destroy them. So
yeah,
I love seeing all the fireflies now that
Mm.
I leave all the leaves, and it has increased
Yeah.
so much in our backyard.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's where they live.
it's so easy to,
Yeah.
change your aesthetic.
Okay, we're at 8:30. We're actually running a little late.
okay.
And we have lost a few people, but we do have the book to give away. So hang on, I'm just going to bring back my question here. So we have a skill testing question that's not allowed to be answered by our experts.
That's okay. I already have the book.
Now, I'm not even going to make a big plug for fundraising either, because there's only a few of us left on here. But if you do want to make a donation, that's where you can do it, is to our partner Tree Fest Ottawa. Christine Earnshaw is on the call with us tonight from Tree Fest. We are also always happy to take volunteer hours. Donations of your time are probably even more valuable than your money sometimes. Okay, so time for our giveaway. It's multiple choice. So whoever types it into the chat, although really and truly just shout it out, and somebody's going to win this. Everybody's going to win something tonight. So the question is, which of the following steps was not recommended for cold conditioning or cold stratification of seeds? Was it A, adding moisture to the soil or vermiculite, planting the seeds in the soil in a mini greenhouse to go outside, placing the seeds in the soil in a plastic bag in the fridge, or placing the seeds in the soil in a plastic bag in the freezer?
Yay.
Diane wins the book.
Yay.
That was pretty easy.
That was pretty easy. That was
I had
very
to read
easy.
them over twice to figure it.
But I
And
thought it because
Kirsten? Kirsten, you're still with us?
Yes, I am.
Hi, I've
Hi.
got some seeds for you, some native seeds if you would like them. So if you want to get in touch with me, send me an email. I will send you a list of the available ones and you can sort of pick whichever ones you would like from there. How's that?
That's great. I got a whole bunch of seeds from Melanie as well.
Oh,
so-
yeah. Oh,
Then
nice.
great, then
Yeah,
maybe I
got a
can
whole
fill in
bunch
some
of
gaps for you.
I've been sharing them around and
That's
trying to get
good.
it to plant
it-
them with me. So
Is
That's
there
good.
anything you're looking for, Kirsten, that maybe we have?
I have to look through to see what she sent me and see what, I know there was a couple things I wanted that I don't think I got. So I'll contact you and see what you have and see if you fill
That's
in my
good.
voids.
Perfect.
And I hope
Nice.
to have plants. Hopefully they're gonna work out for me so I can bring some plants to the
Nice.
plant
That'd
giveaway.
be fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that
Yes.
would be fantastic. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
yes,
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
This
Have a
is
good
great.
evening.
have a
You
good
too.
night.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Ah.